I knew the tide was turning the moment Dylan referred to my server protocols as vintage. Not classic, not legacy. Vintage. Like my work was a goddamn cassette tape he found in his dad's garage. I just spent the morning untangling a financial sync error that could have nuked our Q3 reports. And this pipsqueak with a man bun and a smartwatch thought he was clever for pointing out my lack of JIRA tickets. Why don't we just automate this whole process? He chirped, holding a la croix like it was a goblet of youth. You still use batch scripts. I stared at him over my bifocals. And yet, things still get done on time. Wild, isn't it? He didn't laugh. Just made a little note on his iPad and turned to his little entourage of junior analysts, who nodded like bobbleheads hopped up on LinkedIn inspiration porn. That was the first week. By the second, I was being introduced in meetings as Martha, who's been here a long time, like I was part of the furniture. No mention of how I'd written the initial vendor routing logic from scratch in 1999, back when our accounting suite could barely run without freezing up like a squirrel in headlights. No nod to the time I patched a production bug at 2 a.m. during a snowstorm, using nothing but remote access, a cup of black coffee, and a prayer. Nope, just a dinosaur waiting for the meteor. Speaking of meteors, real quick, if you're into these kinds of stories where quiet folks like me finally get their moment, do me a small favor, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to hit my first 10K subscribers, and every click is like a middle finger to smug nephews everywhere. Let's make Dylan nervous together. Now, back to the slow motion train wreck. I've always been the kind of woman who knew which wires not to cut, quietly useful, a behind-the-scenes fixer. The kind who could pull off a departmental miracle by noon and be forgotten by lunch. I didn't need fanfare. Hell, I hated fanfare. But I did expect respect, at least the kind that comes from people knowing they'd drown without you. Apparently, Dylan missed that memo. He was the CEO's nephew, some sort of innovation consultant, which near as I could tell meant baby-faced axeman with a Canva addiction. His PowerPoint decks were like fever dreams, color-coded graphs about operational fluidity and cross-team synergy. I asked him once what any of it meant in terms of actual daily process. He said, and I quote, "It's about vibes, not minutiae, vibes." He started sniffing around the way new dogs do, lifting the proverbial leg on everything. My filing system, too analog, my vendor cheat sheets, outdated and unscalable. My post-it wall with years of patch notes and undocumented workflows, a liability. It wasn't long before he scheduled a transition workshop with me and his little pod of underqualified minions. Wanted me to walk them through my responsibilities so they could modernize the workflow. I said sure, scheduled it, then quietly canceled it 5 minutes before, citing a VPN crash and a mysterious auth token issue. They didn't know enough to question it. Hell, Dylan thought VPNs were something you downloaded from the App Store. The tension ratcheted up from there. I started noticing things, my access levels being downgraded, my name getting left off calendar invites. One day, he physically removed a backup drive from my desk, my personal one, and said, "We'll get IT to upload this to the cloud. No more siloed assets, okay?" He grinned like he'd just done me a favor. That's when I started backing up my backups, crypting files under pseudonyms, creating decoy folders and nesting critical tools under misleading names like Old HR Compliance or 404 Archive Do Not Open. If they were going to treat me like a relic, I'd become one, but not without locking the vault first. You ever spend 2 decades building something only to realize the new regime thinks it's just there, like the plumbing in a house? That was me. I was the pipes. The skeleton, haunted whisper in the walls that kept the whole thing upright. And Dylan, he was trying to paint over cracks he didn't even know existed. But I did. And I started counting. Days, decisions, failures waiting to happen. The shift had begun. They just didn't know it yet. It happened on a Thursday. That cursed flavorless, beige day where nothing ever goes right and the office coffee tastes like recycled sadness. We were crammed into the conference room, glass walls, 2 bright lights. A scent I can only describe as printer toner and unspoken layoffs. Dylan was giving another one of his culture uplift pep talks, arms flailing like he was conjuring synergy from thin air. He had the whole junior team nodding along, hypnotized by his buzzword salad. I was there too, quietly thumbing through a vendor log that he didn't even know existed, trying to figure out why the East Coast trial server kept rejecting our FTP calls. Again, then he said it. "Listen," Dylan started, pacing like a TED Talk wannabe. "We've got to evolve. This isn't 2002. We can't keep clinging to dead weight processes or dead weight people. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. He looked straight at me when he said, "Old-timers like you slow us down." The room went still. A few nervous chuckles rippled around the table like guilty farts. Then the kicker, his uncle, our CEO, let out a full damn belly laugh, like Dylan had just delivered a killer punchline instead of a loaded slap. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, past the collar of the blouse I regretted ironing, and settle behind my eyes. I didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at the innovation consultant like I was watching a raccoon chew through a power line. I wanted to say 1,000 things. Wanted to remind them all who wrote the disaster recovery protocol they used last spring. Wanted to ask Dylan what his plan was when the invoice chain broke because he forgot the 3-step verification handshake I'd manually installed after that 2017 data breach. I wanted to stand up and ask if he could even explain the difference between an alias email and a redirect. But I didn't. I just smiled, tight and dry. The kind you wear to funerals and HR meetings. Meeting ended. Dylan strutted out. I packed up my folder, walked past 3 people who couldn't meet my eyes, and made my way to the parking lot like I'd just walked off a battlefield that only I knew was on fire. At home, I sat at the kitchen table in silence for a good 40 minutes. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the tick of the wall clock I once won at a company raffle for Employee of the Month, August 2008. I remembered that day. Remembered thinking it meant something. I pulled out my laptop, opened a blank Word doc, titled it Exit Strategy. For a second, I really thought I'd go through with it. Write a scorched earth resignation letter so poetic they'd study it in HR training modules for decades. Just hit print, walk in Monday, and drop the mic. I even pictured Dylan reading it aloud in front of the team with that confused golden retriever look he always wore when anything had nuance. But then I thought about something else. The access keys, patchwork automation scripts I'd written in desperation during a payroll outage back in 2015. The vendor contract expiring in 11 weeks that no one had renewed. The internal-only phone line rerouting to our fulfillment partner that I negotiated off books with a guy named Rusty, who only takes calls before 9 a.m. and still faxes everything. I thought about the smile Dylan wore when he humiliated me, the kind of smirk you only see on people who think nothing bad's ever gonna happen to them. And that's when I knew I wasn't done. They wanted the old-timer gone. Fine, I'd leave eventually, but not before I turned every undocumented workaround into an invisible Jenga tower and let them keep pulling blocks. One by one. I closed the Word doc, didn't even save it. Instead, I opened a fresh spreadsheet and started watching. Thing about holding a company together with spit, instinct, and 30,000 hours of lived experience is no one notices until the spit dries. They think it's the software, the shiny dashboards, the cloud subscriptions Dylan won't shut up about. But Faircrest didn't run on cloud infrastructure. It ran on me. On knowing that the internal inventory tool crashes if you enter a SKU with a trailing space, on remembering that the warehouse database only syncs if the file name includes a capital S in shipment, on whispering to accounting that the vendor marked W&R Logistics in the billing portal is actually Weissman and Rowe, and if you send the invoice under the wrong name, it gets bounced for 6 days. Try automating that. Dylan never saw the backbone, only the paint job, and that's why, in his infinite bravado, stood in the center of the office with his sleeves rolled up, talking expansion. "We're going nationwide," he declared, pointer finger stabbing at a projected map like Caesar on caffeine. "East Coast first. Pilot hub goes live in 6 weeks. We've got the infrastructure. We've got the vision. We did not have the infrastructure. What we had was a nest of half-documented dependencies, a warehouse API duct taped to a deprecated payment module, a VPN license expiring in 2 months that no one, not one damn person, had budgeted to renew. But Dylan had a pitch deck and a denim jacket, so apparently that was enough. I sat in the back, sipping stale conference room coffee from a mug that still said Java Queen in chipped letters, and began making a list. Not the official handover doc they'd eventually ask for. My list. I called it the retirement folder, but it wasn't a gift. It was a mirror. A long, methodical reflection of how much of Faircrest only existed because I remembered what others had forgotten or never knew to begin with. Page 1. Legacy access codes to our original payment gateway that still processed 12% of our transactions without anyone realizing it. Page 2. The undocumented handshake between our internal reporting tool and the third-party compliance API. If you didn't click sync reports before exporting, got corrupted data. Guess who found that out the hard way in 2013? Page 3. The real reason one of our clients' orders always shipped 2 days late. The label printer on loading dock #3 was calibrated in metric. But only I knew how to reset it because Steve from IT got fired mid-onboarding and never left documentation. Each page was a pressure point. A trapdoor. Not sabotage, God no. I wasn't some cartoon villain with a grudge and a USB stick. I was just documenting gravity. Quietly, carefully, like an undertaker measuring coffins. And Dylan? He was dancing on a roof built of wet plywood, thinking it was marble. What struck me hardest, what curled under my skin and wouldn't let go, was how smug he was about the expansion. Like the engine would run faster just because he painted flames on the hood. His entire plan hinged on assumptions built from metrics he didn't understand, on workflows he thought were standardized, but were really patched together by hand over 2 decades of that didn't work. Let me try this instead. He didn't know there was no standard operating procedure. There was just me and my memory, and the 1,000 tiny rituals I performed each day to keep Faircrest pretending it was a real company. He'd cut me out, pushed me to the perimeter, assumed I'd just vanish. But I don't vanish. I absorb, I watch, I write. The retirement folder wasn't revenge, it was insurance, it was leverage. And as Dylan stomped across the office floor, talking about data hygiene and agile frameworks, I quietly added another entry. Email auto-forward rule. CEO's reports only generate properly if sent from internal IP. External triggers fail 1 in 4 times. Dylan doesn't know. Don't tell him. And I saved it and smiled. The first thing to disappear was the yellow sticky note taped to the underside of my keyboard tray, the one with the fax number for the warehouse guy who still refused to use email. It had been there for 14 years. That ink had survived 3 office remodels and 1 coffee flood. Now it was gone, folded neatly and fed into the shredder like it had never existed. I didn't need to make a scene. This wasn't a movie. There were no dramatic file deletions or locked drawers. Just absence, a little more every day. The quiet kind of erasure only someone like me could perform with surgical precision. I started with the physical stuff. Obsolete USPs filled with system keys, old vendor cheat sheets, address books held together with paper clips and time. All of it disappeared like cigarette smoke on a windy porch. Not maliciously, not dramatically. Just pruned. Like dead leaves off a vine no one noticed was still holding up the trellis. Vendor contacts were the next to retire. Rusty, who handled our packaging contracts from a no-name outfit in Dayton, gone. Not literally, he still played cards with my cousin on Saturdays, but as far as Faircrest was concerned, unreachable. His cell number was gone from the shared spreadsheet. His email got bounced, and the only working line was buried in a subfolder labeled 2020 COVID Supply Chain Backup. Do not edit. Dylan wasn't going to find it unless divine intervention showed up wearing bifocals and a fleece vest. And I didn't stop there. I began archiving crucial Howler notes under nonsense file names like Draft Winter Party 2021 V6 Final 2. DocX, and moving them into an old HR directory Dylan had already marked for deletion. Wanna streamline, sweetheart? Be my guest. The beauty of it was how invisible it all felt. No one noticed, not because I was sneaky, but because they weren't looking. Dylan was too busy building his empire, pitching the East Coast rollout to the board like he was launching a damn rocket. His implementation roadmap looked like a toddler's crayon drawing. No contingencies, no data integrity checkpoints, no maintenance buffers, just a bunch of color-coded promises and a budget projection built on dreams and Adderall. Meanwhile, I sat in meetings with my notepad open and a polite smile glued to my face like a taxidermy grin. Every time Dylan said something ridiculous, we're streamlining backend auth protocols to allow for maximum platform flexibility, I'd nod like he was Moses on a mountaintop. Oh, Dylan, I'd say, your energy's exactly what this company needed. And he beamed, ate it up, thought I was a convert, thought he'd tamed the old lioness. God help him. The junior staff started coming to me less, not because they were getting smarter, but because they didn't even know what they were missing. That was part of the brilliance. They thought my silence meant compliance, but it wasn't submission, it was subtraction. I stopped reminding them about the monthly vendor check-ins, stopped backstopping their broken queries, let Dylan's team roll out updates without my final code review just once or twice. just enough to make them think I'd gone hands-off. Meanwhile, the retirement folder swelled with new entries. Shipping integration. Fails if customs codes aren't manually refreshed every 18 days. Alert removed from task manager. No replacement. Accounting escalation contact at QuickPay, Margaret. Retiring next month. Nobody else picks up. Backup process for Q2 compliance reports runs only if triggered by legacy script in Martha's cron job. Unassigned. These weren't landmines. They were slow leaks. And the thing about leaks is, nobody notices until the floor caves in. I started walking lighter, sleeping better. There was a stillness in me now, like the eye of a storm. Dylan could prance around in his new dress shoes and quote Forbes all he wanted. Didn't realize I'd been holding the net beneath his trapeze act this whole time. And now, I was folding it, carefully, quietly, thread by thread. It came wrapped in fake warmth and scented toner. An email from HR titled, "Let's talk about your future," exclamation mark and all, like a used car pitch dressed in business casual. I opened it, already knowing what it was. The wording was corporate theater, mutual opportunity, generous incentive, next chapter. I read it twice, not for clarity, but to make sure I didn't laugh out loud and trigger the IT help desk with a spilled coffee ticket. I printed it, slid it under a fridge magnet shaped like a flamingo. Then I went for a walk. When I came back, I replied with 3 words, "Let's discuss Monday." Monday came. HR sat me down in conference room C, one of those beige windowless coffins that smells like fear and expired toner. He smiled like morticians trying to sell me on casket upgrades. Dylan wasn't there, of course. Puppeteers don't take bows during the matinee. They said things like, "We know how hard you've worked, Martha. You've built a strong foundation here. We think this is a perfect time for you to enjoy some well-earned rest." I nodded, soft and wide-eyed, like someone's spinster aunt finally accepting that her cats are her real children. "Wow," I whispered. I wasn't expecting this, which was a lie. I had begged for this moment in silence for months, but the theater had to play out. They needed me to seem grateful, and I was, just not for the reasons they thought. "I suppose it's time," I said, folding my hands like I was about to break into prayer. "Thank you." The room exhaled. They thought they'd won, that they'd surgically removed the last stubborn limb of Faircrest's analog past. God bless them. Word spread like a birthday fart in a crowded elevator. Some coworkers avoided eye contact altogether, too spineless to say anything. Others, usually the ones with the deepest creases in their foreheads, came to my desk like mourners at a wake. "I heard you're retiring. Good for you. Finally get to relax, huh? Relax." Like I'd spent the last 26 years lounging on a cloud made of Excel sheets and duct tape. But I smiled. I always smiled. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. My last week unfolded like a funeral for secrets. I cleared my desk in reverse order of importance. Took down the dog-eared sticky note with the batch script shortcut. Deleted my auto reminders for invoice flags. Unplugged the external hard drive labeled recipes that contained, among other things, our original payment API logs. On Wednesday, they asked if I could update the onboarding template for the new vendor support team. I submitted a blank Word doc with the title "Welcome to Faircrest." That was it. No bullet points, no links, just one line of text at the bottom. "If you have questions, ask Dylan." Nobody questioned it. Thursday, they scheduled a walkthrough for the East Coast launch system. I skipped it. Told them I had a dentist appointment. Instead, I sat in my car at a Wendy's parking lot and ate chili while watching pigeons fight over a French fry. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. Friday was cake day. A sheet cake from Safeway with my name misspelled, Marta, and balloons that read "Congrats" in generic font. Dylan didn't show. Too busy polishing his rollout for the investors, I assumed. The whole thing felt like watching someone else's high school graduation from behind a two-way mirror. I made a speech. Short, sweet, sterile. "I've loved my time here. I'm proud of what we've built. I trust the company's in good hands." Then I raised my paper cup of sparkling cider, took a tiny bite of flavorless frosting, and walked back to my desk. The only thing I took with me when I left that day was a single manila folder, labeled "Retirement." Inside it, nothing. The real one was safe. At home. On a USB drive no one knew existed. Password protected with my mother's maiden name and the make of my first car, stored in a zippered pouch inside a sewing kit I kept in my pantry. You can't train someone to remember what I remembered. You can't onboard instinct. And you damn sure can't replace the quiet architecture of survival with a Slack bot and a standing desk. I didn't burn Faircrest down. I just took away the scaffolding. Let gravity do the rest. For the first week after I left, the world kept spinning. Faircrest didn't implode. No alarms went off. East Coast Pilot even kicked off with a ribbon-cutting photo and some cringeworthy LinkedIn posts about digital acceleration. Dylan grinned in every picture like he'd just taught fire to walk. I watched from my back porch, slippers on, wine glass in hand, wrapped in a fleece blanket with a hole burned through from an incident involving a microwave and a Pop-Tart back in '09. Birds chirped. My inbox stayed empty. The silence tasted suspicious, like canned peaches that smell sweet but bite back with rot. By day 10, the cracks whispered. A former teammate, Kelly from procurement, texted me after hours, casual and upbeat. "Hey Martha, do you remember the override code for W&R Logistics? Our shipment tracker stuck and Dylan's team said you used to handle that." I ignored it. Sipped, deleted. Day 12, I saw my first sign of distress. Not through any official channels, no, through LinkedIn. One of Dylan's golden boys posted a vague little slice of panic disguised as hustle. When the unexpected happens, you learn to pivot. Proud of my team for troubleshooting today's wild ride. #agility #growth mindset #grateful translation. Something broke. Day 14, the first real tremor. Apparently, during a live demo for a potential investor group, the client analytics portal froze. Not crashed, hung, mid-refresh. No error code, just silence. The app held its breath and never exhaled. They had to end the demo early. The thing was, I'd rigged that portal years ago to run clean only if the legacy report queue was flushed every 72 hours. It wasn't in the code. It wasn't documented. It was a manual operation triggered from a buried panel on the admin interface that no one had used but me. Flush skipped equals database chokehold. And now, it was choking. I chuckled, muted the group chat screenshots a friend forwarded me, and took another sip. That one tasted like vindication. By the end of week 3, shipments started arriving at the wrong fulfillment centers. An entire batch of East Coast welcome kits, swag bags, onboarding materials, internal documents ended up in Oregon. Nobody could figure out why. I could have told them. Address mapping in our shipping tool pulled its default from a backup config file that Dylan's crew deleted during their streamlining phase. They thought it was clutter. Turns out, clutter was the only reason the system hadn't self-immolated years ago. And then the financial sync started acting up. Payroll reports were bouncing between systems with mismatched totals. Expense reimbursements sat in limbo. Employees were seeing duplicate tax withholdings, and Dylan, his usual flair, announced a short-term transition hiccup. I knew the truth. There was a job scheduler I'd configured manually to bridge a version mismatch between the finance API and our legacy systems. It had to be reset every 10 days via a command line tool no one but me had installed. Guess what they uninstalled? They'd replaced it with some shiny automation that failed silently. Beautiful failure. Elegant, even, like watching someone polish a rusted-out Pinto and drive it off a cliff. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. I poured more wine, refreshed the group chats. Someone had posted, "Anyone have Martha's number? We think a vendor contact might still be under her name." 2 reactions. One was the crying laughing emoji. The other was a skull. By now, Dylan must have known things weren't as bulletproof as he'd claimed. But he hadn't reached out. Pride's a hell of a drug. And me. It was calm, lighter than I'd felt in years. It was like watching termites eat through drywall from a safe distance. You don't need to intervene. You just wait for the wall to sag. The countdown had started. They just hadn't heard the ticking yet. Week 4 arrived like a wrecking ball with a Wi-Fi connection. The East Coast launch was supposed to be a coronation. Dylan's big "I told you so." They'd scheduled a live stream walkthrough with regional managers, press releases queued, even sent out branded mugs that read Faircrest 2.0, "The future starts now." And it did start. For exactly 19 minutes. 19 minutes of login errors, frozen dashboards, inventory black holes, and error messages that might as well have been written in ancient Sumerian. Dylan's team rebooted, retried, rolled back. None of it mattered. Nothing held. The system didn't just stutter, it curled up and died. The East Coast staff couldn't clock in. Shipping labels wouldn't print. The billing module spit out invoices with negative balances. One client received a bill for $14,732.08. Dylan said it was a data inversion issue. The client said it was a red flag and canceled their contract within the hour. The following morning, Dylan was seen pacing the office barefoot, with his blazer slung over his shoulder like a defeated prom king. He called vendors, contractors, even tried blaming a subcontracted dev ops firm from New Jersey. Spoiler alert, it wasn't Jersey's fault. The real culprit? About 24 undocumented scripts buried deep in the original infrastructure. Scripts I'd written, maintained, and kept functioning with a mix of scheduled rituals, duct-taped logic, and sheer voodoo. Some had dependencies on obsolete file paths and relied on a time-triggered backup of a legacy database that no longer technically existed unless you knew the redirect. Which, of course, I did. Dylan didn't. By midweek, Faircrest's board called an emergency session. They brought in auditors, external consultants, people with suits too stiff and shoes too quiet. They dug. What they found wasn't a bomb. It was a graveyard, skeletons of undocumented logic. Ancient scripts with names like Last Resort 2, CMD, and Hotfix Oct 2014 Really Final Bat that no one could trace. Jenkins jobs running under ghost admin accounts. File dependencies pointed at drives that were physically removed years ago, but emulated through mapped loops I'd created manually. At one point, an investigator asked Dylan what override authfixback meant. He said, "I don't know, ask Martha." They did. I got the email Thursday afternoon. Plain, polite, clinical. Subject: consulting opportunity. Your expertise is requested. Hi, Martha. Hope you're enjoying retirement. As we evaluate ongoing systems challenges post-expansion, we're exploring consulting arrangements with legacy system experts to support critical recovery efforts. We'd value your insight. Would you be open to a short-term engagement? Warm regards, Brenda K., VP of Operations, Faircrest Systems. I didn't open it right away. Just stared at the preview while stirring sugar into my tea, humming along to a Johnny Cash record and watching the mailman slip circulars into my box like clockwork hadn't been shattered. Then I clicked. Read it once. Read it again. Then I hit delete. No reply, no response. Let them squint at their own mess. Let them hold their meetings, analyze their charts, fire their interns, blame the weather. They bulldozed the mapmaker and wondered why they couldn't find the way out. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even smug. Just done. My hands were clean, their hands, covered in the dust of a kingdom they never understood. The final report came down like a guillotine wrapped in corporate jargon. Organizational negligence due to over-reliance on undocumented legacy processes. That was the phrase. Cold, clinical, fatal. It echoed through Slack threads and boardrooms like a ghost whisper through ductwork. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew who'd built the foundation, knew who had propped up Faircrest's illusion of modernity with paperclips and prayers, and knew who ripped the safety net while grinning for the camera. Dylan didn't get a public firing. That would have required the company to admit a mistake. Instead, he was reassigned to an advisory role with flexible remote arrangements, which is HR code for get out and don't make noise on the way down. His LinkedIn changed from Chief Transformation Architect to open to work in 48 hours. No farewell post, no digital confetti. Faircrest's East Coast expansion was shelved indefinitely. The budget was quietly pulled. Office leases weren't renewed. One of the two major clients who'd been sold on the new system backed out completely. The other one demanded contractual damages. Legal's been chewing on that ever since. Inside the company, morale dropped like a barbell through drywall. The juniors started whispering. Why didn't anyone know this stuff? Did Martha ever document that? Was she really the only one who understood the finance tool? Yes. Yes, she was. I didn't post about it, didn't forward the report. Didn't even smile when Kelly messaged me privately. You were right. Wish you'd stayed. I left her on read. Somewhere around the third week post-implosion, I pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, bossed edges. The kind you save for weddings or warnings. I wrote one sentence. Old-timers built your castle on matchsticks. No signature. No return address. I slid it into the mail addressed to Daniel K., CFO of Faircrest Systems. The same man who once told me during a budget meeting, we need to evolve past dependency on people. He said it while sipping cucumber water and nodding at Dylan like a proud dad. Irony now probably tasted like rusted copper. After that, I sat out on my porch, legs up, cat in my lap, tea cooling in the breeze. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even satisfied in the petty, teeth-baring way revenge usually lands. It was something deeper, a stillness in the ribs, a final exhale. I didn't torch the place, didn't delete files, didn't plant a virus. I just left. They bulldozed the bridge themselves, laughing all the way, thinking they'd upgraded the architecture. But all they really did was shove the mapmaker into retirement. And now, I'm a ghost in their machine, unreachable, unreplaceable, and finally, at peace. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.